How's it going, everybody? This is Dailies to Downloads. My name is Chad. With me is Erik. Yes, it is the same host. He has a new look again this week.
I know. I don't plan it this way. I just, I don't normally shower in general in life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but no, I just
That'll get
washed
us a
that.
lot of viewers.
It looks like there's this like mullet kind of thing, but like
Hey,
it's
business in the front, party in the back, right?
well, yes, but the party is socially distanced and
Yeah.
is only one person. Is only one person.
We're
Don't
not
send
advocating
anyone.
partying. It's
Yeah. Please do not send any law enforcement to the house. So, just myself.
Well, this week we are going to be covering 3D. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? So we're going to cover 3D. There's a lot of aspects to 3D. We're going to try and cover all the important topics here. But before we get to some of our questions about 3D and whether or not we like it, we should cover some of its history. So obviously 3D is meant to give you the illusion of a third dimension, and it's been around since 1915 in some form or another. And ideally, you need glasses to see that illusion, and the technology has always been very expensive, and it's also known as stereoscopic filmmaking. The golden era of 3D is from 1952 to 1954, and the first movie was Buona Devil, which was produced, written, and directed by Arch Obler. I have not seen that. Erik, have you seen Buona Devil?
No, like wanna like
BW BWANA.
No, I've not seen
Yeah,
it.
that's not one of the more well knowns from the golden era. But
The golden era did not start with a golden
yeah,
select.
they didn't declare it that day that came out, probably.
No, that was not the start. Yeah.
So some of the well-known 3D titles from that era are House of Wax, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Hitchcock's Dial, M for Murder. There are a bunch. Those are just a few. It ended up declining in the spring of 1954 because of costs and because theatrical widescreen formats were being used more prevalently. The last 3D title of this period was 1955's Revenge of the Creature, obviously a sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it actually did well at the box office for the fact that it was declining. It was basically a theater decision. So Erik, how many of the older 3D movies have you seen, if any? Because then before you answer, I'll just say I've probably seen a bunch of these movies. I certainly haven't seen them in 3D, and I didn't go to any anniversary showings or restorations, where they might have had it in 3D. I just kind of watch the movies as the movies. But what do you think?
Yeah, from that era, I also probably saw them in 2D and probably unaware that they were even originally presented in 3D. Now, yeah, some of like the William Castle like films, like you mentioned, and things like that, that always kind of came with that gimmick of
Right.
it might be a smell-o-vision, or it might
Yeah, he had a ton of gimmicks.
yeah, the tingler, right? You're gonna get electric shock on
Yeah.
your feet, things that now, I mean, sound
The
pretty
Tingler
crazy.
is a very cheesy movie, but I actually like. I went through a big Vincent Price phase there for a while, and I actually
Yeah,
think
yeah,
The
yeah.
Tingler is fun for what it is. But
But I mean, that's something though that is a very different experience if you had been watching it in 1950 whatever in a
yeah,
theater, because they had like the little electric zapper things on the seats, and then I think there was like this like a apparition, or maybe I'm confusing some of the other William Castle like House on Haunted Hill and stuff.
and
But
that's
like,
okay because he's had so many that
yeah,
he tried so many different things.
that I almost feel like I lumped 3D into that kind of gimmicky style from that time period, and like the Joe Dante homage to the Matinee, the John Goodman film, also incorporates William.
True, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I do remember that there was like a retrospective at Film Forum down in Manhattan on Houston Street, where about like probably 11 or 12 years ago, where they were showing the films from that specific era, 3D films from that era, and I actually don't think I went to any. I think it was just cool to kind of like, this is probably before like Wikipedia was, so like just to see a list of what they were.
Right.
And yeah, for like the real obsessed, I guess, cinephiles, like that would be your only opportunity to see them on. And back then, obviously, it was like 35 millimeter film. So I don't know how the 3D processing on celluloid even really works. So
Right.
if any of those that I would have seen from that era would not have been in 3D.
And in terms of like kind of anniversaries like that where they were showing all these movies in 3D again after all those years, if I knew anybody that went to that stuff, I would honestly ask them like what they like so much about the 3D aspect that they have to see them. Is I mean, because you look back on some of these movies now and like for nostalgia purposes, or if you like B movies or old horror or whatever, like it's fun to go back and watch those movies just based on those aspects of it. But I know I if I were alive back then and this guy was trying all these different gimmicks, I'd probably be annoyed. I'd be like, oh God, who cares?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that's why it seemed to kind of favor what we call like genre films, right? Like sci-fi horror. We weren't really getting Streetcar Named Desire in 3D. We weren't getting like
That would be
serious,
something to see.
yeah, we weren't getting like serious dramas or comedies. It was always sort of like those matinee, what they say for like the young kids, or like this is before drive-in, but
Right.
that kind of like pulp stuff where it'd be like a double feature, right? Like each would be like 60 minutes, so maybe they'd have 2 3D features or one and
Right.
not, things like that. But
Right. Well, that was the first period. So there was another period. There's multiple actually, and there's the revival period is from 1960 to 1984, and this is where it kind of gets into the weeds a little bit. In the early 60s, a handful of titles were released using the antiquated 3D technology, but there was an advance in the technology called Space Vision 3D. It gets, like I said, it gets kind of complex, but suffice to say, it was easier to film with this, and it was more efficient. And it was also from the aforementioned Arch Obler of Buona Devil fame, Eric.
okay,
Um,
okay.
and he was the first to use it in the movie called The Bubble from 1966. And in 1970, the technology advanced again, and it was called Stereo Vision, which people might remember that logo on some films if they go back and look. One of the first films released with this was actually a softcore sex comedy called The Stewardesses, which cost $100,000 to make and earned over 27 million. And when I read this, I was really surprised. I was like, why have I not heard of this? And it made so much money. But anyway, the quality of the 1970s 3D films were not much more inventive in terms of how they used the technology. It might have advanced from a filmmaking perspective, but in terms of the storytelling quality, it really didn't advance. And many were either softcore or hardcore adult films, or horror films, or a combination of both, like Paul Morrissey's Flesh for Frankenstein, which was also Andy Warhol's Frankenstein. So anyway, that was an example of the combination. But so this is the era where we would see Jaws 3D, Amityville 3D, and as Eric is sporting on his shirt, Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D. So, I've seen a lot of these horror sequels, Eric. I haven't seen any of the softcore films of this era.
But the hardcore ones.
Yeah, although that would make for an interesting get together with friends. Hey guys, we're not watching the new Marvel movie.
I mean, a part of me at least likes that. If you're going to a 3D movie, you want to see things pop out at you, right? I assume that's why you go to a 3D movie. So
well,
if you're going to a hardcore, at least you know what you're looking for, and you're not.
Well, if you're going to a hardcore 3D movie, you know what you're looking for there too. And I would think you would know what. I think you would know what you want popped out at you too.
Exactly.
But hey,
exactly. So I kind of admire the no frills, non-elitist attitude. Like, look, come on, you're looking for popping body parts. Well, that's why you show up, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope they didn't recycle the glasses though. But that's,
oh God, yeah. Hey, that's
terrible.
But so I mean, in terms of what you were talking about there, and we'll probably get into more of this, but wanting things to pop out at you, I'll just kind of state my philosophy of 3D here. Like, to me, the movie has to work on its own. Like, it has to work on its own. And if I watch a movie after the fact, even if I've seen it in 3D, if I watch it again and I can tell that they film scenes specifically for 3D, like if they're, throwing something at the screen or pointing something at the screen, it takes me out of the movie more often than not. There were a lot of TV shows that tried it at one point in the 90s. Like every time I get to the Home Improvement episode, if I rewatch Home Improvement, like there's an episode where they try 3D, and he points tools at the screen and stuff, and it's
Right.
like,
And you would need to like get that week's like issue of TV Guide because they'd have
yeah,
like 3D glasses, so
right.
you could get ready for. And I think Simpsons may have done that too at one point.
A lot of them did. You know what? There was a week there where one of them tried 3D, another one tried like the smell-o-vision type
Yeah.
thing, and I think there was even a third gimmick of some kind. It was just stupid, and those are like the weaker episodes of any of those sitcoms
Sure.
that you watched.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, after that period, we obviously enter the rebirth of 3D, which was anywhere from 1985 to 2003. And during this time, we would see IMAX become a big deal in that they would produce nonfiction 3D documentaries, and Disney would make short 3D films, basically used as special attractions for their venues. You didn't really see these on movie screens. You
Be like
would,
museums, I guess, right?
you might see them well after the fact as an extra, like on Terminator 2 or something like that. I think they might have showed whatever the video for the ride was. But did you ever, Eric, see an IMAX documentary before it became really widespread?
Not in 3D. But there were definitely. I remember my first IMAX experience was at. I want to say it was like not the Museum of Natural History, but it was a school trip, probably like in high school or middle school, and it was was it called Earth or it was a space, outer space sort of thing, or about the moon rather. I don't recall. 45 minutes. I wasn't paying attention, but I do remember it was a real IMAX screen. That was like when IMAX's first initial I don't know, introduction, I guess, to mainstream audiences.
Right.
Before we started having regular feature films in that category.
Right. The theaters were really small.
Education. What?
The theaters were really small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was just, my introduction to IMAX was on the educational front.
Right. Mine as well. There was one theater back then. I grew up in Central PA, so Harrisburg being the capital, there was one theater in Harrisburg. I think it was near, like, attached to one of the museum there. And I made a point to go there once, and I think the movie I watched, and they were all about 50 minutes long, give or take. The one I watched, I think it was on Grease, because it was like the only one playing, and it was cool for what it was.
At least with IMAX, it was nice that you don't need to wear anything or have any kind of visual enhancement. You know what I mean? It's just, it's a larger screen, so wherever you place yourself in the audience, in the seats, in the center, mid center, whatever, that would give whatever effect it was intended to have on you. You didn't have to have any other kind of plastic apparatus, to get the effect of it.
Right. So at the end of this period, there was a big advance in IMAX film projectors, CGI, and so forth, and that meant that 3D had a new opportunity to grow and thrive. And that brings us into the period we're in now, which goes from 2003 to the present. And one of the biggest proponents of the 3D nowadays is James Cameron. And he gave us one of the first full-length 3D IMAX features, which was Ghosts of the Abyss. And I think I did see that on DVD. I didn't see it in 3D, but, and obviously now we have countless films that were available even pre-COVID, available in 3D over the past decade, from blockbusters to art house titles to animation films. And if you wanted to, for a period there, I don't think this is very popular anymore, you could buy a 3D capable TV and watch 3D movies. You get buying the discs in the comfort of your own home. I think I knew one person, it wasn't really a friend, it was like an acquaintance who got all that stuff. And I really...
It was a friend, but then after you bought it, it became an acquaintance. You're like, no, I'm sorry. Not on my watch. Are you going to be hanging out with somebody who buys a 3D television? It
just seemed like a waste of money to me.
I remember that for maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
But I totally forgot that existed until right now.
Yeah. Right, because you still need to wear the eyewear.
Oh,
And
you do?
it
Yeah, yeah,
and like that's the thing. Like there have been over the years people trying to do like advanced technology where you don't have to wear the eyewear, but that hasn't happened. And so one of the big topics with this period is post-production 3D versus native production 3D. And that's a term I got from a James Cameron quote. And he was saying he's always been one of the biggest proponents of 3D. And he said one of the biggest issues of why it's declining is because a lot of studios thought it would better to use post-production 3D. And you can always tell when you go see a movie in 3D if it is in post-production to me. Like you can tell because it's just really sloppily done often
yeah.
a lot of times. Like Clash of the Titans is one that comes to mind right off the top of my head, the remake of Clash of the Titans. And so what do you think, Eric? Have you seen a lot of movies in 3D, or you try to avoid them like I do?
Um, I typically during that whole boom of, I feel like I first became aware that this was like back and going to be a real, I don't know, a thing with some staying power for a little while. In like 2007, 2008 is when I really started. I think they were enough theaters were like prepping for Avatar to come like a year
Right.
from then. So I think that even required certain enhancements to the projection and the projection booths and all the actual equipment, and some of them had to be converted in such a way, others not so much, but which led to other issues. But I remember there was the remake. It's so bad. I mean, the Brendan Fraser Journey to the Center of the Earth,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I feel like that was the first film I saw in 3D in a mainstream release. And because I was curious, because even then we knew about.
Well, being the big Brendan Fraser fan that you are.
I mean, look, we were probably a couple months away from a Mummy Part 3 or whatever, so you had to get your fix somehow. Um, but for me, I I remember that being a huge talking point. The whole like post the either it's shot in 3D, or it's like post converted to 3D, and in that sense, one of the big issues too was that it would look like unnecessarily dark, the
Right.
image, because that's another thing. A lot watching these films in theaters too, you would have to like, I'm gonna say this incorrectly, I guess, but like almost like put something over uh, the projector, like the lens, I guess, and it would need to darken it, the image. In there are more technical ways to describe this, but sometimes I would go see a non 3D movie, but they never switched it back.
Right.
So the image was, reasonably dark, and that was always very annoying. And in the case of 3D films that were post, converted, um, if I could avoid it, I would avoid it. I think that sometimes, um, as with any of these things, there was a surcharge. It was more expensive, right, to do the
Right.
3D. Yeah.
Right.
IMAX and 3D, et cetera, was always more expensive than the normal 2D version. And more often than not, if I didn't want to have like it was shot in 3D, gotta see it in 3D, blah blah blah, then I would always opt for the 2D version. Um,
Right.
but I do feel, I guess, a little bit though differently than what you mentioned when you said, like, you're kind of anti things popping out at the screen, or
Right.
those like in your face, this is 3D kind of. For me, I just feel like that I don't mind that is kind of what 3D is, and that's not to like lowbrow it, I guess. But remember that around the James Cameron stuff, like to me, it got very annoying after a while. How it's like you're gonna feel. It was like these buzzwords, like you'll feel fully immersed. You'll feel. And when I saw
Well,
Avatar,
they were really pushing it. Yeah.
yeah, and like I don't know, like Avatar, like okay, here's some leaves above my head. Like I still didn't feel fully immersed with Avatar. Like there were
Did you
times
see Avatar in 3D?
I did, yeah.
Well, see,
Uh,
it's funny. I saw it in 3D as well, and I'll say this: the only movies that I've seen in 3D are because the showtime matched up with when I could see the movie.
right.
Like
So
I
you willing to
never
put the extra $3?
voluntarily went to see a movie in 3D, and Avatar happened to be one of those. And I will say this: to me, that's the only movie I watched that I could say it was used in a way that didn't annoy me. Like now, this is not getting into the quality of whether or not we like the movie Avatar, but I've never, even with Avatar, even though I thought it was used well enough there, it didn't wow me to the point where I said, well, when I watch this again, I need to watch it in 3D. Because
Right.
again, like I said, the movie needs to hold up on its own.
Yeah.
It shouldn't
Yeah.
need 3D to prop itself up, in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I guess that was always the it felt like it was obviously a selling point to say like we see still today with like VR talk, right? Like I
Right.
feel like we're always trying to say that the 2D watching is not enough and it's passive and it's blah
True.
blah blah. But I'm like, hey, it's been working for over 100 and something years. Like I think it's gonna work
Right.
for another, I don't know. Maybe we'll be doing next week's episode on TikTok, but like I think it's gonna stay with us for a while. You'll always see all these whenever movie sales are down, all these new inventions for
Right.
these.
And that's what I was going to get to. Like it kind of it weighs on a business decision from the studios, in the theatrical companies basically wanting to increase traffic.
Yeah.
And it might do that for a little bit, but it kind of, in the case of 3D, it backfired in their face a little bit. And
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
listen to some of the people that have commented over the years, one guy, Daniel Engber, who's a columnist for Slate, asked, what happened to 3D? It may have died from a case of too much crap in the system.
Yeah.
The inferior films. And Jeffrey Katzenberg is another one who said it was just an oversaturation of movies that weren't good.
Yeah.
Was one reason. And another reason that I came across that I thought was interesting, and when you think about it in retrospect, it is true. Film critic Mark Kermode, who was a big detractor of 3D, talked about how distributors would limit the availability of 2D showings and kind of railroad people into 3D showings, which, as you said, comes with a higher ticket price.
Yeah.
And that definitely, like, you don't really notice it at the time, but maybe some people did, but like that they definitely made 2D showings harder to get to.
Absolutely. I feel like there would be like the 10 a.m. and like the 11:30 at night,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
in between those, sandwiched in were the 3D showings.
right.
At all times. And yeah, I don't know, like 17, $18, like probably whatever it was at
Well,
the
yeah,
time.
I mean, if it was like for a while there, it was kind of like there was the 3D showings, and then there were sometimes IMAX 3D showings, which were like the most expensive,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think that, and what happened with this, so you look at this, you look at 3D, them trying to railroad people into those showings, and you also have the emergence of streaming.
Hmm.
And so you take those two things together, and people are like, well, I'm not going to pay these prices. I'm not going to go to a 3D movie where, you know, Joe Schmo's kids are kicking my seat, or whoever down in front is talking and on their cell phone. I'm going to stay home and
Yeah.
watch stuff in the comfort of my own home. And then you have the pandemic, which we want to jump really ahead. Now people have to stay home. So,
Yeah, in that respect, look, if we save the theaters by having everything in 3D, I guess I'll support it. And like I do think, yeah, the conversation was kind of steered by James Cameron, somewhat to, I think, 3D's disadvantage at times, because
yeah,
some of the best things, which I know you've seen as well, some of them, like we started getting really interesting documentary auteurs doing 3D. Like
yeah,
Cave of Forgotten Dreams and
yeah,
Pina Bausch, the choreographer. And things that I think were those. I guess those were more interesting to me because I think it's a little
right,
bit easier. And I'm probably totally wrong about this, but I feel like when you are making a film that is either completely animated, um, like a typical like a Pixar film, whatever, or a film like Avatar, which is about 90% digitally enhanced
right,
animation. The 3D, I think you can kind of create it and steer it towards 3D. I think in the case of the documentaries, I was really
right,
interested in how you're taking something that is a we are life is in 3D, right? We have dimensions around us, but we're still flat image. How do you kind of shoot that for 3D
Right.
use
And
different kind of cameras. So
I've seen
there was
Cave of the Forgotten
innovation taking
Dreams.
place, but yeah.
I've seen Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which is a Herzog documentary, and I think I must have saw it in 3D because I think that if I recall correctly, I don't know if they offered a lot of 2D showings of that one.
I don't think so. Yeah.
And but here's the thing, I don't remember any part of it with connected with the 3D aspect. That was a good documentary because Herzog is a good filmmaker and
Yeah, yeah,
knows
yeah.
how to make documentaries. That's why it was good. And like, like you were saying, yeah, there were a bunch of random filmmakers, maybe not a lot of them, some of them you really wouldn't expect to kind of come out of the woodwork and really push this, but some of them did. And like, he would not have been, like, if somebody had wanted me to predict, like, I would have not have predicted Werner Herzog
Yeah,
to be one
and
of
you
those
can,
guys. But
yeah, yeah, and thinking, and within that line of thinking, I was going back the other day and watching a few interviews that Scorsese had done when Hugo came out, because that was a 3D one too, and
right.
like he did certain press with James Cameron, because I think James Cameron was still pushing it at this point. This is
Yeah.
2011, and you can tell, like, I think Scorsese has said, like, it was the most stressful production like he's ever
Yeah.
had to do, and it went so over budget and so over the days, and so but that was something like, okay, he shot it in 3D. I got to see it in 3D. Um, I mean, it was cool. Like, but I think also what we're kind of getting at is that 3D does not necessarily, no gimmick will enhance the quality of a film. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
uh, that might be like another way of, like, there have been some, like you mentioned, some cheap schlocky horror movies. Like, I remember there was it must have been like 2008, 2009, the remake of Piranha, which is like, a trashy whatever, but like it takes fun in like having blood and stuff thrown at you,
Right. Right.
um and it's kind of like mocking itself and kind of mocking what 3D is by really indulging in all those kind of gimmicky things, which for me, I was like, okay, like, it knows what it is, and it's kind of relishing in that 3D is inherently kind of over the top, right? And to me, at least. And so I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah. And like, we're in an era now where, you look at why theaters or distributors or studios wanted 3D to be such a big thing. They wanted people to look at the experience of going to the theater and say, oh, well, the only way I can see this movie in 3D is by going to the theater and paying for a ticket. And this gets into almost like a larger conversation with how misguided some of these decision makers really are. Because if their goal was to get people to go to the theater on a regular basis to see a 3D movie, they have failed.
Yeah, yeah,
But pre-pandemic, they failed. And you were going to talk about in a second here some of the movies that are still yet to come that are going to be in 3D. But like, you look at the 3D that they were pushing that didn't, like, ended up declining in a big way and still is. And you look at some of the decisions that AMC made during the pandemic, trying to get people back into the theater. And, social distancing and virus aside, they don't see the issue, which is people prefer convenience, and number one. Number two, if you want to get people to go to the theater again, you need to make the theatrical experience more comfortable.
hmm
And that doesn't mean 3D, in my
no,
opinion.
yeah,
It means cutting down on some of the annoyances and pet peeves that people experience when they spend 12 to 15 or more dollars for a ticket and they go and they can't have an enjoyable experience for whatever reason. So,
yeah, yeah. No, and I feel like you're right. Like, I think a lot of the innovation that comes from the movie industry is always very, like, reactionary.
yeah,
Like, we got Cinerama in larger screens because of the, like, invention of television, right? And like, oh my God, if people are gonna have television, why would they ever come to the theater again? We're gonna make the
right.
screens bigger. We're gonna have things that TV can't do, like it'll pop out at you. Or, and I'm sure we're due for that again once the
Sure.
pandemic subsides. We'll have some new kind of gimmick that's more of a band-aid
Hey, if they bring
over.
the Tingler aspects back, I'm there.
If they bring William Castle on as a creative consultant on how to bring forth all, then okay, it could be interesting. especially now that so many theaters did have to like digitally uh, convert and add all these extra additional things. I also just want to mention that there were also two to like put on people's radar that were somewhat recent. One was the Jean-Luc Godard film Goodbye to Language,
Yeah.
which is like 3-4 years old, something like that.
Mhm.
And it's mostly all in 3D, but there is one sequence which I think at Cannes people said like people started applauding just because the 3D is all about like the left eye. It's one frame. The blue can be like the left eye. The red is like the right eye, and blah blah blah. And like he has something where this man like walks to like another side of the frame and then like walks back into it, and it's almost like the left and right eye are like converging, because
Right.
3D is an illusion, right? So your brain is like trying to process that,
Right.
which is really impressive. And the other one was a Chinese film called Long Day's Journey into Night, no relation to the Eugene O'Neill play, that came out last year, which is also very good and has a hour, I'll say 59-minute, I think they said, but hour-long single take that is all in 3D.
Oh wow.
The movie's like 2 hours, and then the main character goes into a movie theater and falls asleep. And that's when you know it's time to put on your glasses. And then his dream is this hour-long single take that's in 3D.
See, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's not like, um, I mean, is it gimmicky? I mean, the movie is somewhat of a fantastical kind of thing, not with special effects, but it has this kind of mysterious
I mean,
allure.
obviously you couldn't do that all the time, and obviously there's only so many interesting and innovative ways you can use it as part of the story, but that in and of itself sounds interesting to me.
Yeah. When you were talking earlier about the horror films from like the 80s and stuff, I feel like there would often be a character that has to put on 3D glasses in the movie. Like
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street, The Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. She puts on the glasses, and that's the cue for the audience to put on your glasses as well. Because we could only afford to shoot 10 minutes of this movie in 3D, so we got
Right.
to see it. And so I do think there have been some examples recently that are using it more creatively than just throwing in 3D as like an extra bonus.
Right. And we even mentioned like that a lot of times nowadays you'll see trailers that are in 3D, um, which to me is just completely unnecessary. But
I assume you're attending a 3D movie though, right? Or else how could you see them in 3D? Are they giving you glasses for the trailers?
yeah, well, yeah, that's the whole thing. So like
Okay, yeah,
a
yeah,
lot
yeah.
of the times what would happen was you would go to the theater and you would see maybe a couple previews that were in 2D, and then they would say, okay, now put your 3D
Right,
glasses on, and that would be you would just keep them on then.
right.
And so then you would see some trailers in 3D, which it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I
But
know. And also like this might just be a me thing too, because back in the 3D craze, I was mostly wearing contacts, so it wasn't as much of an issue. But if I had to like put 3D glasses on top of glasses or whatever, like
right.
or if someone has some like altered vision or can't see 3D or whatever.
One of our former 411
Yeah,
colleagues, not mentioning any names, but has said that he has no interest in 3D because he can't see it.
3D, yeah. It just felt like, and sometimes I don't know why. Like I would have this thing where I go see a 3D film, and like once in a while I'm going like, to like look at this. I don't know why. And it's
Well,
a
because sometimes they're not in 3D. Like some films, you can really
right,
tell.
right.
Like you'll take your glasses down, and
It's
you'll be able to
blurrier,
see that. Okay, this one's not in 3D at all. Like this scene.
Yeah. So that was like there were too many. I do like IMAX because it's just there's no apparatus in front of you. It's all just very straightforward.
Right.
But yeah, that was a big change.
So you were saying that before we came on that there was a lot of movies kind of coming down the pike that are still slated to be in 3D. What are some of them?
Yeah. Because I was just kind of curious because it has felt like the 3D craze that we were in recently had kind of subsided, and I mean that is probably still the case, but it looks like in a very kind of granular level, Disney is still going full speed ahead with all of their live action remakes, like Little Mermaid
Right.
is coming out by Rob Marshall. That has been filmed in 2D will be coming out in 3D. Same with their remake of Cinderella. I'm sorry, Cinderella, not Cinderella. Cruella, the Emma Stone as Cruella de Vil movie. So they're still on that track. Then there are obviously the usual big blockbusters, like apparently No Time to Die, the new James Bond one. They'll be also putting out in 3D,
Oh,
filmed in 2D. But also there's 3D and there's IMAX 3D. I
right.
feel like if you see an IMAX 3D, you have to like mortgage your house at that point. 'Cause
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a very expensive ticket at that
it
point.
is. It is.
Uh, it seems like Disney is like just post converting all of their Black Widow,
Right.
you
Which,
know, all the.
like, which I don't understand. To me, it's such a waste of money. But
It must be cheap enough to like. It's funny, like there. It seems like there's so many coming out that are going that route, and very few that are actually shot in 3D anymore. If you
right.
take out like animated films like Minions, and things like that, Space Jam 2 was apparently shot in 3D, but then again, I'm not sure. Most of it's animated, I imagine.
Oh, come on! I know you already have your 3D TV set up
I
for
mean,
Space Jam too.
I'll see the movie. There's going to be an untitled. So far, it's called Untitled My Little Pony film, 3D,
Oh,
shot in 3D for the purists out there. In Hotel Transylvania 4, like a lot. The animated ones are easier to make in 3D because you're probably designing the animation with 3D in mind.
and
Uh,
also, like, it's one of those things. Like, if the kids haven't seen a movie in 3D, they logically the parents would want to take their kids to see a movie in 3D because it's an event,
yeah,
and it might be more interesting for them. I mean, my kids haven't seen a movie in 3D. We've been
yeah,
to the theater certainly, but
and I get, and also like that's with the rise of Pixar and everything. We used to, or maybe we still call that 3D animation,
right.
which I guess now has a different kind of connotation to it. But we call it like traditional hand-drawn animation, and then the next would be we called it 3D animation. Maybe the term has changed now. Maybe it's called something else when it's
I mean,
designed on.
when I I usually just refer to it as hand drawn versus CGI, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all done on a computer. I mean,
right.
it's all the cells are.
Even the hand drawn is done on a computer to a large extent.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
mean, yeah, that's true.
I'll just say I've never liked 3D. In terms of being a fun gimmick, it can be cool from time to time, but I don't like it because in no scenario have I ever wished to watch the movie in 3D for a second time. And I don't think, as we discussed, that it is a viable, logical way to keep people coming to the theater.
No.
I think that when you see a movie in 3D, more often than not, people either get tired of the ticket price or they just don't like the gimmick enough that they want to keep revisiting it because of some of the things we mentioned, like post production versus native production, that kind of thing. So that's my final thoughts on this, Eric. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you like it? You want it to stay around? Do you think it just needs to go away?
I mean, as a mainstream kind of big Hollywood, you know, spearheaded thing, I would like it to kind of go away. As with all these kind of things, there's enough work being done like on the margins, like there are like experimental filmmakers who work in 3D, but a different kind of 3D. Like it doesn't necessarily require glasses, but
Right.
they use like strobe lighting techniques and
Sure.
things like that, putting like black light between the so it's about tricking your brain essentially that what you're
Right.
seeing is a 3D image. So there are some filmmakers doing that is really cool, but the general mainstream um, you know glut that we've kind of had, it would be nice to kind of see that die out. And I mean, I do kind of feel like we're we're not where we were say 10 years ago, where it felt like every week was another big
Right.
3D push.
I
And
don't think they railroad as much as they used to.
yeah, or I just feel like now it's the opposite. Now there's only like one or two 3D showings a
Yeah.
day, as of
Yeah.
whereas it used to be the other way around.
Right.
So
Right. Well, that will wrap up our 3D. If you want to share your feelings on 3D, please feel free to do so by commenting. Make sure to check out my other show, The Nitty Gritty. And For Erik, my name is Chad, and we will see you next week.